Hello, beautiful humans. I thought today I'm going to have a little heart to heart with my fans about being bullied at school. And I'm hoping very much that some of you guys will relate to this and how this really relates to why I ever joined a band in the first place. So I guess I want to start with infant school. We have to go to school at about age 5. And I can remember that scene where I was put in the back of a van and driven to this school, which was this very strange school that to me looked like a prison. And I just didn't want to go. And I remember struggling with my parents and crying my eyes out and jumping around in their arms and being carried into the school. And I can remember the school corridors at the time being these terrible green coloured walls and the very echoey corridors. And I was literally lumped in with a load of strangers. Now, you think, well, that sounds pretty good, really. But I was a very plump kid at school. I mean, I want to say the word fat, but I don't want to body shame anyone. We can get into all that sort of PC stuff. But at the time, being larger than the norm was seen, with a bunch of 5-year-olds, right? It was seen as something worthy of criticism by your peers. And when I say large, I mean I've got a little picture here of what I used to look like when I was a kid. So I would say that's not too glamorous. I'm in a rock band, and people tend not to look like that when they're in rock bands, although probably a gap in the market. So yeah, so I was this very plump kid, and my parents, for some bizarre reason, didn't seem to be able to do anything about that. They just kept feeding me, although perhaps part of that was genetic. But I remember always then feeling different because people's reactions to me at school were often quite provocative and quite critical. And also I remember the school teachers handling this really badly, where when it came to lunchtime, right, I was cordoned off and given very small portions. People became aware of that. I was the big girl in the corner that had to be managed in a particular way. And so from the get-go, I just felt different. I felt I didn't fit in. And I mean, you guys must know what it's like. People really, really kind of warm up to school, and when they're dropped off by their parents when they're little, they think it's a brilliant opportunity for fun and frolics and playing with other children and sharing and caring and all that sort of stuff. But my experience was not like that. And it didn't really get better, to be fair, when I went to junior school. So what's that? That sort of age 8 up to 12, I think, isn't it? Something like that in the UK. These were really terrible times at junior school. I mean, I used to end up being drawn into fights with big, tall boys. I felt that I was quite a nice person. I didn't want to cause trouble. I just actually just wanted to write fun songs in the schoolyard. And so this was not a private school, was that, the local schools in a moderately rough area. And I guess what comes with that is lots of other frightened children who also feel they need to build armor around themselves to be able to survive. And there comes a sort of pecking order of who's cool and who's not cool, who's the one that's going to get picked on, because then if you've got a victim, then everyone else feels that they're not. It's only now that I'm older that I can even reflect upon this, but kind of when you're in it, you'll know this, guys, if you identify with this. You're in a difficult situation where you feel isolated, you feel alone, and everyone's going, farty, kick her head in, farty. So I ended up in quite a few kind of skirmishes. And then it didn't really get that much better because I tried to make friends, and I made this friend with this girl who we'll call Susanna, and we used to hang around together. But Susanna was in a slightly more middle-class family. I was in quite a working-class family. But then one day, Susanna invited me to go to her house, go and play. Finally arrived. I feel whole. Her parents thought I was just some sort of scruffy little toe rag, probably, that didn't come from the sort of background that they would prefer. Her mother was a bit of a Mrs. Bouquet in a sense, a sort of upper working class snob, and they wouldn't let me play in the house. So Susanna and I used to play in the shed at the bottom of the garden, and she had a couple of rabbits. She used to keep these rabbits in this shed, and I was only allowed to go in there with her. So right from early on, I felt really, really kind of out of kilter, very excluded, it was quite a weird experience. I tried so much to fit in, but my parents, they didn't give me the right advice about how to survive these quite difficult scenarios at school. So I had to make up my own strategy as I went along. And I was such a nice kid, really. But when I got out of junior school and hit senior school, it was there that the real transformational stuff really began. Well, you know what it's like when you're a teenager and you're sort of in this interstice between being a complete child and a grown up, and you're somewhere in between. And it was a time where I was no longer wanting to do little collages of animals from the Encyclopedia Britannica, but in actual fact, I was plotting escape from the school grounds most of the time. I was quite a loner as well, actually. I mean, I did make friends there, mainly because when people picked teams at the school, I was always one of the ones that was sort of sitting on the bench at the end with all the other misfits and rejects. And somehow the rejects kind of come together as a bit of a sort of Addams Family style gang. So I did have a couple of, Susanna kind of disappeared when I came to senior school. But I did start to wear irregular clothes for school. And I was in the top class, but always at the bottom. And I wore irregular clothes. And then some of the real hard nut bullies, I started to hang around with them because even though they bullied me and used to sometimes sort of pull my hair in the bus stop, because I hung around with them, then no one else would have a go at me. And then I really went on a rocky road of not listening in school. I used to play truant, and I would actually hide in the wardrobe at home sometimes rather than go to school. Sometimes I'd hear my parents come in from work, because my dad was sometimes on shifts, and I used to hide it under the bed. And you can imagine, right? Hiding under a bed is more exciting than science and maths. So you can see there was something really dysfunctional going on there. And then because I then went on a downhill slide of always starting to fail things, really justified and solidified, really, the idea that I was not normal. Now, I did start to lose weight because I went down that starvation route and out with food. But yeah, the whole navigating the bully was really a challenge. Just when I started to get into music. Because when I was hanging around with my reject friends, I started to look at things like Kerrang magazine and various indie magazines and things like that. So I started to identify with grown-ups who were in bands. I thought they were really cool, and I thought if I could be like one of them, because people seem to really like them and queue outside of venues all night for them and cry their eyes out when these people sing and hang round waiting for their signature. I thought if I could even have half of that, then perhaps I could build myself an armor, a bit like a Darth Vader character where no one could wound my heart with insults and traumatizing behaviors, pushing me around. This girl had real trauma. Yeah, just the same. It is the same person, though, and when I look at her, well, I don't recognize this person, by the way. I mean, that dress is outrageously cool, but I'm the same person. And I have become a manifestation of all those petty micro traumas. I'm more than aware that some people have had childhoods where there's abuse, there's poverty, huge holes in people's souls, and a whole lifetime of trauma to follow that lands people in such diabolical situations. I did kind of dig my way out of all of that eventually. I had 13 years, I'd say 13 years of wondering why I was born on this earth into this insane sort of bosh as hell, the Colosseum of critical judgment. And I guess even though the music industry is an absolutely batshit shocking place to even attempt to try and negotiate, that was still better than being in an absolute open prison. So that's where we're at with that. I will do another episode on this, but I hope this has been useful to hear for me to share some of this stuff, because it does relate to our new track that's out called Bulletproof, where this is a song of hope, a song of empowerment. I hope you guys dial into that and listen to Freakstar's Bulletproof, because without being so obvious,